Hello? Yes. Yes, I can. Okay. Okay. We're on standby, so we'll be starting up here shortly.
Okay.
You're all set. Just start out with some basic questions. Okay. All right, you ready? Okay. Could you please state your name?
Lon K. Redman, R-E-D-M-A-N.
Okay. Can you tell me your place of birth and date of birth?
Conowal, Oklahoma, 4/10/20.
1420. Okay. Tell me about growing up in Oklahoma.
Conowal is a town of 3,000,
Mm-hmm.
has been and still is. Born and raised up until I was 12 years old on a farm, a very small farm near Conowal. This was during the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression. And at that time, my immediate family moved from Conowal to Florida, Miami, Florida to be exact. And things were much easier at that time. There was a lot more work to be had in South Florida, a lot more to do, better schools, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. How old were you when the war broke out then?
I was 21.
21. When did you enlist, or were you drafted?
No.
Drafted?
I had the pleasure of being the first group that was drafted in the city of Miami, Florida.
And when was this?
This was in 10th of February, 1941.
And what unit did you?
I went into an infantry division. It was the 31st Infantry Division, which was the Dixie Division, which was made up of Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama National Guards. I was in there as a private, making $21 a month, until a little later on I got to be a corporal, and I got to be making $54 a month. Big money.
Well, tell me about your war experiences.
Well, I trained, I have to tell a little story here. Coming from Conowal, Oklahoma, that's where the 90th Infantry Division was made up from in World War I. The patch that they wear is TO. That means Texas, Oklahoma for World War I. After I was drafted, I finally went to OCS and got commissioned as a lieutenant. Went on through the war, went to England, naturally went through all the training that was available in those days, the desert training and this, that, and the other. I went to England, was in the invasion, and we were the first unit all the way across Germany. Got back home, went to my little hometown in Oklahoma. Now this is many years past. I'm in uniform. I go into my local bank, and here's the president of the bank. He came out to greet me, and he says, I see that you're from the 90th Division. I said, that's true. I says, further, I was with the 357th Regiment C Company. He said, well, I got news for you, because he says, that's the same company that I commanded in World War I.
Really?
Now, everything that goes around comes around. And this
true.
proves it.
Very true. So tell me, you were training in England with the 90th Infantry
Right.
Division. Were you involved in D-Day?
Yes, we landed D-Day.
Tell me about your experiences from D-Day on towards the end.
Well, primarily, as you are aware, the infantry lives in the ground, and they're there for keeps. Either you get shot up and get out, or you get sick or something else. Otherwise, you stay right there. After we landed, we had a terribly tough time in getting ourselves organized and whatnot, and getting everything moving. There's much difference between training exercises and not being shot at than there is from some guy shooting at you from the other side. And we had an awful lot of that, had a lot of disorganization and so forth, but we got ourselves together and did a tremendous job during the European theater of Operation War.
Well, great. Well, tell me about towards the end of the war, the 90th was moving towards Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
About what time was this?
This was first part of April 45.
45.
And we were ordered, we were up in the north portion of what turned out to be West Germany, in a place called Weiden. We were ordered to go south into a redoubt area south of Czechoslovakia where the Germans had been ordered, so they said, or so the intelligence people said, they had been ordered into a redoubt and a reorganization area south of Czechoslovakia, and they were going to counterattack us as we moved on in toward Berlin. It never came about, but that was the reason we were moving into Czechoslovakia and south of it. And that's where we ran into the Holocaust, the murder camps.
Well, tell me about Flossenburg from the beginning, please.
We got information of Flossenburg through our normal channels. We knew about where the location was. We moved up to it with sufficient force to take it. And we found upon our arrival that they had very little as far as guards. There was no really organized resistance. So we moved into it, and in a very short time we had cleaned it out of all German guards, the dogs, SS, and so on. So it was a fairly simple, easy operation.
Well, tell me about, what did you see, things you saw when you first went into the camps?
Well, just a little bit of background. Nature had bestowed this beautiful stadium affair on the ground over the years. It had, this stadium affair had been formed. With the layout of the landscape, horseshoe type. The upper back end of it was the village of Flossenburg. And from the village of Flossenburg, you could look out the back and see the activity in the camp because it was down on the next level, but very obvious and very clear to those people living there. And this plays a part in the thing. On the next level, they actually had the camp. They had the barracks. They had workplaces and so forth. And on the third level, we found out later, they had the ovens. So what it amounted to, they had, and you can visualize this ground sloping off away from the hill, away from the village. They had rigged a gravity-fed or gravity-pulled railroad car, small little cars. You probably have seen it in these little cars in most all of these camps. This one ran by gravity from up on the main camp, down through a tunnel all the way into the ovens. And the little car would come rolling down there on its own. And the guy was standing there with a tong, and he in turn would turn this body around. It was on a swivel, the body around, and then slide it right into the oven and do the cremation and then make his records and so on. And we discovered that later on as we were moving into this thing. And it was very, as you can imagine, very, very repulsive. Many, many bodies laying around. A few that were still alive that we naturally tried to help. So we decided, after we got the place cleaned up, and got our people notified to get the follow-up up forward to handle these people. Naturally, the frontline troops didn't waste a great lot of time on things in the back. We had units that handled those. But we decided that the thing to do here was to bring all the citizens out of their homes and get them up into this camp and have them parade around and look at it. We did that. There wasn't one of them that admitted that he knew the camp was there. There wasn't one of them that admitted that he'd ever seen anything. And that went on for years, and as a matter of fact, I have some friends that go back to Germany quite frequently, and they've made a couple of trips back to Flossenburg's, and the people still don't admit it. And they were close enough to all of this activity that you could see it with the naked eye. You didn't need field glasses or anything. All you had to do was look. And this, by the way, was sort of typical with the Germans for a good long time. At the end of 45, I came back to the States, stayed here a short time, went back to Germany into the occupation. During the years, I stayed there 4 years. During those years, no one, even though we were bringing these troops back in from the east and what have you, not one of them would ever admit that he ever fought on the Western Front. All of them fought on the Eastern Front. And that went on for years. And finally, many years later, they started to admit this. And we said, well, we want to see you guys. We want to meet up with you. We want to know what you look like. And sure enough, they did. They turned out and they said, okay, we were there. We were the guys that were shooting you up. But back to the camps, they refused to acknowledge it completely. And they still refuse to, even today.
When you were in the camps, you said there was a lot of dead bodies and a few survivors around. Did you have any contact with any of the inmates of the camp when you arrived?
Well, we talked to them, yes. But those camps, those death camps were, I'm sure you've not been around a large group of dead people that have been laying around for some time. The stench is unbelievable, unbelievable.
How were they killed?
The thing that we tried to do in the short amount of time that we have there was to help get these people loaded or get them into a position so that they could be helped.
The people who were killed, how were they killed? Do you know?
Most of them appeared to have starved to death or worked to death or whatever. They were, in other words, they were not shot.
Before you discovered Flossenburg, did you or your unit have any idea this kind of stuff was going on in Germany, that these camps existed, that any of this was happening?
No.
None at all?
I said no. I didn't. And one of the things that we were aware of here in the United States, to back up just a bit, would realize that everything was about the Germans was bad, as was the Japanese. So our focus was really on those two. And we never really I don't remember having seen in the press or what I had that was pertained to me that indicated to me that there was something going on, as we found out later there was, in the Holocaust and the people being sent back to Germany and all of this stuff. But to answer your question, no, I didn't. And as far as I know, the other people I was associated didn't either.
What was your reactions then when you and your comrades discovered this, just out of the blue seemingly?
It's a very, very bitter pill. Very bitter.
You were telling me about how you discovered all these very detailed records of all the inmates who were brought into the camp and who were killed. what other aspects of the camp can you tell me about?
Well, they, as I said, they would roll these down the hill, and it was a gravity thing. And then there was a group of prisoners up at the top. This thing was on a small cable, and a thing that and this cart now that I'm talking about is about this wide, that you can lay one body on it. That's how big it was. They would crank that thing back up into its starting position. A couple of them up there would load a body. Back it would go again. And as I say, their record keeping was meticulous. The Germans are known for this, and they were no different there. They recorded the person. They recorded his. They took his hair if they wanted. They knocked his gold teeth out, and anything else that he might have that was of any interest to them. But they did. It was no great problem. In other words, you didn't have to be a spy or a sleuth or anything to find out how many people had gone through there, because it was right there, right in front of you. All you had to do was pick it up, because they were very, very keen on keeping good records.
How long were you there?
At Flossenburg?
Mm-hmm.
I would say 2 days, probably. No more than that.
And where did your unit go from there?
We went right on south to Kamm, which is just east of Munich, and we took a little time off over there to go over and look at Dachau, because Dachau had just been liberated, and it again was a bigger version of Flossenburg. So all of our troops that wanted to could go over and have a look at it, and most of them did.
How did I'm sorry, go ahead.
Then from Kamm, we received a change in orders. In other words, we were going south and east. We received a change in order to switch back and go back north to Prague, which is where we headed and where the war ended, matter of fact, during that period.
How did your experience at Flossenburg, did it change the way you looked at the war, or the way you fought the war, your attitude towards the enemy? How did it impact you?
I think there's been a lot more impact since then than there was at the time, because actually you're in the infantry, and I speak to that. You really got nothing in your mind except protecting your hide and trying to get through this mess. So you don't really have too much time to get fixed on anything else. You know that you're going to be there to the end of the thing, so you've got to do everything possible to take care of yourself. So I would say that the effect on me personally was much greater after the whistle was blown, the shooting had stopped. It was much more so after that than it was exactly at that moment that I saw these people.
And what was that impact, you think? How did it affect you? You say it was greater.
It was difficult, but again, it was not as unusual as you might think, because on several occasions during the war, we had our own people shot up. Now, my division lost 3,800 killed, 18,000 wounded. So we saw this really at close hand, and I've seen stacks of our guys. So it wasn't as, it wasn't something that I'd not seen before. And as I say, I don't think it affected me nearly as much at that particular moment as it did later on.
So your unit was around Prague when the war ended?
Mm-hmm. South Prague, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What happened to the rest of your military service then after that?
Well, more war stories here. We moved from our, I was right outside of Sousse. We moved back into Germany, and my unit moved up to Weiden, which is north. That's where we came from. And my particular battalion and my company moved on up to the north end of what became the West Germany, to a little place called Hof, H-O-F. And we that's where we established our point for supervising and bringing the Germans back and what have you. And as you know, a part of Czechoslovakia was the Sudetenland. And immediately after the whistle blew and the war was over, the Russians came in and took over Czechoslovakia and booted out all the Germans. So we had this great influx coming into us that we had to be particular with and see that they got off and things like that. Then I stayed on there until the end of, or the middle of December 45, went back to the United States. My division was broken up. It's a reserve division, by the way. It was broken up. I came on back to the States and was reassigned to a new unit. And shortly after I got to the new unit, they were looking for some officers to go back to Germany. And I said, I'll go. And I did. I went back over. And one other note in the connection of the Holocaust, after I got back on the second tour in 1946, I was assigned to command a prison. It would be comparable here to a state prison. This prison was not for the Jewish Holocaust people. It was for the likes of the Russians, the Polish, Lithuanians, Latvians, and so forth. And those are the prisoners I had in this prison. And another group that I had at the same time was 5,000 Jews who, most of them had been in the camps, one place or another. And we had them in camps, feeding them, clothing them, and so on and so forth, getting them out and getting them moved where they were going. And this went on through, always through 1947.
If I could back you up a little bit, you talked about Dachau briefly. You said that you were in the area of it, and a lot of. Did you actually go and see Dachau?
Yes.
Or can you tell me a little bit about that? What you saw there?
It was just a big version of Flossenburg. Mm-hmm. Loads of people that had been laying there for long periods of time, and it can make you sick very quickly. Terrible, really terrible. How anyone could do this, I have no idea. But they had railroad cars loaded with bodies. They had them stacked up around in the camp itself. A stack here, a stack there. And that's what it was.
How long, when you got to Dachau, how long had it been liberated by the time you got there?
I think about 3 days. And they were busy running, getting everything cleaned up. They were busy getting cleaned up.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to add for this interview?
Well, nothing other than I had one very memorable incident that I'll pass on.
Sure.
Whether you know or not, or have you read or heard or whatnot of the Malmedy massacre in the Battle of the Bulge? Mm-hmm. Have you heard that? They had a bunch of Germans that put on American uniforms and came into the lines, and they murdered a bunch of people. After the war, I'm commanding this prison for displaced people, Russians and so on. They took and captured, they recaptured, or they captured all of these guys, the Germans, that had made these attacks on our people. And they convicted them to hang. And who do you think they called to hang these people? Me. And I believe it was 21. They said, we will send you the army hangman the Army had at that time they had a master sergeant who had much experience in this. They said, he'll be down to give you a hand and carry out this mission. And we will be sending you these prisoners very soon, so make preparations immediately. And the sergeant did show up. We went to work on the gallows, had them completed. I called the headquarters and said, okay, the gallows are ready, send the people on. And I didn't know what to do. I wasn't looking forward to this. And lo and behold, they said, well, we got good news for you. They said, you're not going to have to hang them because the courts, the review courts, have found out that they were mistreated and so forth during their interrogations. Therefore, all their sentences have been thrown out, and they're free people. And they're still running around Germany today. Every now and then I pick up a paper and read about Colonel so-and-so who was tried for the massacre, doing this, that, or the other. But it was very exciting.
How long? Can you tell me a little bit more about these DP camps you were in charge of?
I had, in 1947, at that time, I had this prison which was under the control of the U.S. military government, which ran all the political activities. Matter of fact, they ran West Germany, so on and so on. They had decreed that no German could touch a displaced person. If he murdered someone or he committed a crime or whatnot, they called on our people to go pick him up and put him in this into this military government prison, which is what there were two of them over there. I had one of them. At about now this was early '46, and about early '47, the military government came out and passed a rule and said, okay, we're taking off our regulation that the Germans cannot control the DPs, and we're giving it back to them, which is what they did, which put my place out of business because they took practically everyone that was in it, sent them back to Latvia, Lithuania, Soviet Union, and so forth. And that was the end of that phase of the thing. They were sent to wherever they wanted to go, supposedly. Then the other big camp operation that I had was after I left the prison, I was assigned as a post commander down near Stuttgart, a little place called Gippingen. And in that area, in my area of operations, I had a town or city called Ulm, U-L-M. And that's where we had 5,000 Baltic nationals, and we had 5,000 Jews. And we had UNRWA, that was the United Nations Relief Association or whatever. They were actually running the thing, and I was overseeing the thing on the upper level, watching UNRWA to see that they got sufficient supplies and that the security on the place was adequate and that nobody was being harassed and all of this stuff. And we were moving those people as quickly as we could to where they wanted to go. But it did take a good long time, and it was in 1947 before we got it cleared out completely.
Were these people at this camp, you say they were Jews and Baltics, were they camp survivors or?
No, the Jews. Now the Jews and we had them completely separated from the Latvians, Lithuanians, and the other Baltics. But they were all on their own there. And as I say, the bulk of them had been involved in some phase of the Holocaust. In other words, they had been in jail. They'd been in these camps. Now, this prison that I mentioned earlier, the military government prison, had no Jews in it because we had taken all those out and sent them over to these centrally located camps where they got good, well, they got food, they got adequate food, they got clothing and so on, and we were well taken care of as well as we could.
What happened to them after they left?
They
the
went.
camps, you know?
They went. Some went to Australia, and some went to the United States. Some went to Israel, and wherever they wanted to go, was the chore of getting it done.
And you say it took up until 47?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, great. Well, what happened to you there after 47? After the camps were cleared
Well,
out, everybody was sent home.
I got back to the United States in '49 after that tour. I had a really terrific tour. Learned a lot and so forth. I got back home and the Army was being thrown away, as they're doing right now. Exactly. Out, get out. We don't need you anymore. Throw the equipment away. Anyway, I go along with a little of that, but not as much as they do. Anyway, the same thing was happening when I got back. And the offices, the OSS, which was the forerunner of the CIA, was going out of business at that time, and they were switching over to CIA. So I took an assignment with CIA over to the Far East, and I worked over there for some years. I came back home and worked a little longer, and then I retired.
You retired to South Carolina? Is that how you arrived here?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah. And to prove to you that what goes around comes around, when I was drafted in Miami, Florida in '41, I was driving a truck for a guy that had just started his trucking business in 1941.
Mm-hmm.
And now here it is, 1992, and he's the same guy I'm working for today.
Well, that's terrific. Well, I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of myself and the Holocaust Council.
My pleasure, and I hope this thing does a lot of good.
Okay, terrific.
Because we got a lot of people that are non-believers.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Get yourself unhooked.